I am back, finally. I'm back as a whole. The timestamp says 4 hours and 22 minutes, but it felt like, I don't know, 30 minutes maybe less. But I've stopped arguing with clocks down here. They brought me to a room on this same sublevel. Praefectus Visconti, Father Benedetti, and a third man I didn't know. He was much older than them. He didn't give me his name, and frankly, I didn't ask. I was terrified, and look at how I was feeling now. I feel shame. Anyway, he stood near the wall the whole time and just listened. And I remember thinking when I walked in that it made sense. That you want a witness for a conversation like that. That of course someone should be there to hear it. The room was small, just a table, two chairs, and a lamp in the corner with the yellow light you get in old stone buildings. The kind that makes everything feel like it already happened. We sat down and Visconti told me about 1971. He was 34, 3 years into the Custodia. They played him a somehow scrambled reconstruction from 1892, a fisherman from Genoa. 8 seconds pulled from a pewter cross the man was wearing when he died. And then the sound came out of the speakers, and Visconti's first thought, the very first thing, before any of the training, before doctrine, before any of it, was that it was beautiful. Just beautiful. He said he spent years ashamed of that, and then one day he stopped being ashamed, and then he said, when that day happened, was the day he actually started to understand what the tongue really was. He felt overwhelmed, and he thought it was beautiful because it was the sound of God's voice. We strived for it for millennia, and then one day in 1971, he heard it. He finally heard it, and he understood everything. Suddenly, I was blind and deaf not to understand the chance God, our Lord, is actually giving me. This is why I feel shameful. I was terrified. Terrified of what? I know it's normal to feel terrified about things we don't fully understand. But we cannot let fear control us. We cannot let the devil control us and prevent us from reaching God's embrace. This is what I learned. This is what I truly believe. And I keep thinking about his hands. He had them flat on the table the whole time he spoke. The joints, the texture of the skin, you can't get hands like that without... I don't know how many decades it takes. You just know when you see them. They told me more than he did, in a way. Every page he turned, everything he'd sat with, all the years with, I don't know, this specific work in this specific building, and none of it had broken him. He's 81. I feel ashamed of myself. He's been watching the manifestations accelerate for more than 50 years, and he talked about it, the numbers climbing every year, The way you talk about something you'd been waiting your whole life for. He said there was a word for it, a word for how he felt every time the rate went up, and the word was proximity, the warmth that reaches you before you can see the fire. And then he said he went to bed last night knowing, he used that word, knowing, like it was just a fact, that we are closer to the end of the sentence than we have ever been. He said he lay there in the dark, and he was grateful because the warmth of God embraced him. 81 years old, lying in the dark, grateful in a shroud of warmth. I want to be like that one day. I went in expecting, I don't know what I expected, something institutional, I guess. I thought there would be pressure or a directive, or at least a clear sense of what was being asked of me. Instead, there was just this man across the table telling me what 54 years of this work had looked like from the inside. He leaned forward at one point. His voice didn't change volume, it just got cleaner somehow, the way a lens comes into focus, and he said, "God has been speaking through the threshold since the year 33, one word at a time to every death, one sentence, patient in a way we don't have a language for. We as mortals want answers. Patience rewards answers. Imprudence rewards mistakes. The last words are coming and someone needs to be here to hear them after all this time." It was very clear that he wasn't telling me I had to stay. He said I had every choice. I keep coming back to that, the way he said it, that I had every choice, because it's true. He didn't threaten anything, he didn't instruct me, just laid out what the work was and what it would mean if it stopped now, and what it would mean if it didn't. And then he stopped talking and waited. Then after some minutes he said, "Elena gave you to this, and this to you." I've been in this chamber for months, not knowing what I was really doing, chasing something I couldn't explain to anyone, including myself. I left the university, I left everything. I came here, went underground in the most literal sense, and I've been feeding case files into this recorder in the dark and waiting for something to make sense of it. And this man told me it made sense, that it was always going to make sense, that I was following something real, and the thing I was following was heading somewhere real, and I'm almost there, and I'm frightened. I want to say that clear. I'm more frightened than I've been since the night you died. The scale of what's approaching, I can't. There are moments where it gets close to real in my mind and I just stop because I can't hold it. Something that has been building for 2000 years to every human death, approaching its last words, and I am the person in the room who can hear it. Me, that's too much. Sometimes I feel like it's too much, but then again, if not me, then who else? That's the entire point. I understand it now. Visconti was still talking, and Benedetti was standing near the door with the same look on his face that Visconti had, and the old man by the wall had it too. This, I don't know how to describe it, old and settled and completely certain. The kind that takes decades to grow, that you can't put on. And I realized that every person in that room had it, the same warmth, the same weight, the same absolute absence of doubt. And I thought, these aren't three people who decided to believe this. This is what happens to everyone who stays here long enough. This isn't something in the building, this is the building. 16 centuries of it. Every translator who ever sat in this chamber, every scholar who added it to the lexicon, they all passed through some version of that room. And they all came back like this. Warm, certain, motivated. And then I wasn't thinking about the question anymore. That's when the third man left without speaking. I don't know what he came to say. I didn't need to know. Visconti walked me back to this room. He stopped in the doorway and said, "Finish the case." Like it was already done somehow. Like he was narrating something that had already happened. And then he simply left. I said yes to everything. I want that in the record, not because I had to. I keep coming back to that. I had every choice. That's right. But this is the right thing to do. The sentence is almost finished, and I am the one who can hear it, and there is no version of this story where I simply walk away. The reconstruction. going to listen in now. Pressure in my chest, not jaw, not temples. Chest, like a pocket of air that wants out. I'm noting it. Marak said 2 words, repeated at least 6 times in 92 seconds. The same 2 words coming back around again and again for 3 minutes. Okay. Marak becoming, forming, it's in the sequence document Visconti gave me. No need for the lexicon, I trust his file. One of the core developmental terms, the entity used it to describe its own process. It appears in what I believe are the earliest sections of the sentence and what I think are the latest one too. Seth means hidden, secret, concealed. Tier 1, 14 prior occurrences, translation consistent across every translator who's worked with the lexicon. No ambiguity here. So Marak Seth, the forming that is hidden, what grows unseen. I've been trying to map positions for 5 days. My chronology is rough, enormous gaps. Whole center is thinly documented, but the shape is there. What I can reconstruct of the sentence to the medieval and early modern period is this entity describing internal change, not explaining itself from the outside the way the earliest words seem to do. This is describing a process, development, something growing inside something that has no idea it's there. And word 850 approximately is the entity naming its own concealment, not for those few people in the pews, not for Václav Beneš who wrote it down and spent 60 years not knowing what he recorded. No, I mean the 6th time cycling the repetition across 90 seconds. That grammatical in the structure of this thing, I think repetition marks stress, flags what follows as dependent on what's being repeated. What I just said, remember it, everything after me hangs on this. What grows unseen matters to everything that follows. The second half of the sentence, I mean, the bigger sentence, the acceleration, the 60, 80, 100 words per year arriving now, the rate still climbing, all of it, conditional on the concealment holding, on the thing inside the threshold remaining invisible to whatever contains it. For 16 centuries, the Custodia has stood in that cathedral, listened to the organ play and call it God. The Benedictines sealed their incident records and hoped no one would ask. Václav Beneš wrote his account and hid it, and nobody opened it for 45 years. And the sentence went on, word by word, hidden inside every death they documented, advancing through every corpse that found a machine or a room or another body to speak through. Marak set the form that is hidden in 16 centuries of careful, devout, completely misguided documentation, and now I can see it. I am mapping it word by word, faster than anyone in this institution has done before, and Visconti handed me everything I needed to get here and said nothing when he did it. And you know why? Because he already knew, without a single doubt, what I can achieve. I'm going to reach God. I'm going to talk with God. I'm going to solve whatever did this to you, Elena. I hope you're proud of me, of what I'm becoming. The Ramirez problem. I've been circling it between sections of the mapping work. So, hang on with me. The read file, 1983, Portland. Raymond Ramirez, County Deputy. filed the incident report on Thomas Reed. Follow-up note: in December 1984, the fungus had returned to his apartment, growing in the dark places. Watch him, he said. Waiting, 5 hands, died. 1991. Heart attack, age 43. Born around 1948, 35 years old in 1983. Father Morrisons Ramirez, born around 1961. This means 22 in 1983. Oregon, before Detroit. There is no version of those numbers where they're the same man, I know that. 13 years apart, and the death record puts a full stop on one of them in 1991. Except, I went back through the Reed case. What the fungus was really doing. Not the Custodia framing, just the documented behavior. It kept Thomas Reed alive, deliberately, consuming him slowly but managing the consumption, maintaining the host, keeping the body functional. Because a living Reed was a blocked Reed, a body still occupied couldn't cross the threshold, couldn't speak. Ramirez's 1984 note says the fungus was in his apartment, around him, not on him. Watching, he said, waiting for him to become weak. Then in 1991, he died, the file says. What if it didn't wait for weakness? What if it tried something different, something it had learned from the Reed case, were waiting for a natural death and then, feeling the thought, had still failed? Reed died anyway, and the tongue got through anyway. The fungus lost that one. What if it looked at Ramirez and decided that keeping a host from dying at all was more effective than managing a dying one? What if the 1991 death record is wrong? Not missing, not redacted, just wrong, because whoever filed it saw something that looked like death from the outside, and it wasn't. 33 years, 1991 to 2024, a man in his early 30s who the county thought died of heart failure, who has been working, living in Detroit, going to mass at St. Kieran's, getting positioned near a live stream where the tongue manifests, and hearing it and doing nothing, surviving it, going home. The fungus in the Reed case fought the tongue. That was the button. Prevent the manifestation, block the threshold, keep the tongue from getting through. If the same organism has been running Ramirez for 33 years, it's not sending him near manifestations by accident. It's trying to stop them, showing up and losing. Marcus Chan spoke. Catherine Walsh spoke. The sentence keeps advancing, but Ramirez keeps appearing. As if it hasn't found the right moment yet, as if it's still looking for the case where it can do more than stand in a crowd and listen from the wrong side of what's happening. Yeah, I should report this to the Custodia. But I'm not going to, not yet, because the moment I put Raymond Ramirez in an official report, Visconti knows what I know, and Visconti has been giving me exactly what I need at the exact pace that keeps me finding it alone. And I want to understand what he's doing with me before I hand him anything. If this fungus, this organism, this some kind of entity is fighting the tongue, then in some way it's fighting God itself. It's fighting God's manifestations to humans, but at the same time, he reported the accident to Father Morrison, and then it came to us, so maybe it's helping. I don't know what to think. I need to be careful around this kind of information. Anyway, back to the case. TM 1667-039, Marak Seth, the forming that is hidden. One word added to the lexicon.